And we're back. Part two. So, when last I left, we were talking about my deadline policy. And then, in relation to that, what happens if you submit your work late? So, this is how I've been doing it. Basically, you have, okay, I collect the assignment, you don't have it, it's late. So, I then give you 6 hours after the date and time of the deadline. So, if you go in and you look at the exercises, go back to that. I always say at the start of class, 9:30, 9:30, 9:30. So you probably are picking up on a broken record there, that unless we are doing the activity, the exercise in class, it will always be due at the start at 9:30. So what that means is that if you're late, then I give you a 6 hour window to get it to me. Now, obviously, at that point, a hard copy may be out of the question. I may not be in my office to grab it from you. So the best way to handle it there is to just get it to me within those 6 hours. Email attachment is fine. If you do submit a hard copy, do it through the front office, please. Because here again, I'm telling you this because it just happened in the last section, in the last 5 weeks. People slide things under my door, it doesn't make it all the way, or I don't know, somehow, some way it gets lost in the shuffle, or I had someone tape an assignment to my office door. You know how many people walk down the hallway? My office is AJ 385. It's the same hallway as all the other faculty members down that wing and the emerging media and digital design area. The lab, the iLab is down that hallway. There's a lot of people that come through there. Someone could just grab that and I'm not going to know the difference. So, I mean, enough of the half measures. If you're going to submit it as an email attachment, do it, and do it by 3:30. If you're going to submit it as a hard copy, do it by 3:30. And then if you do it through the front office and have them put it in my department mailbox, they will timestamp it for you in there, which is also very helpful to me. So you can still get some points, but here's the key, folks. I'm still deducting you. So this isn't exactly a get out of jail free card. I'm dropping you to a 70%, which is a C minus. Now you need to earn at least a C or better in order to pass this course and move on, because it serves as a prerequisite to other classes like 221 and so forth. So for all intents and purposes, you won't have passed that assignment. And then if you have further mistakes, obviously that's going to reduce your grade even more. However, 65, 61, 52%, that's better than a 0. If you don't get it into me within that 6 hour time window, you're going down to a 0. And I don't have to tell you that in 5 weeks, you do not have a lot of opportunity to make that up. And I will tell you right now, I don't offer extra credit. I want you to do well the things I've asked you to do in the first place. So I guess what I'm saying is don't bother asking, because I'm already giving you the answer. No extra credit. So it says right here in bold, written work submitted to me beyond those 6 hours, then it's a 0. 3:31 is late. So again, be timely, be punctual, be on top of your game when you're in the class. And then if you have subsequent instances of late work, I reserve the right just to drop you to a 0. I mean, if you are that much of a hot mess that you have repeated assignments turned in late in a 1 credit 5 week course, I'm reserving myself that right to just drop you to a 0 and cut my losses so I don't have to keep track of all that stuff. You got to understand, I have 140 students this semester alone. So the 20 of you sitting right now in this room, you're but a fraction of the students that I'm working with this semester. So I'm telling you, the reason I have some of these policies and expectations are in place, it's to help me too, as much as it is to help you. Stay on top of it, stay organized, and so forth. On the technology and social etiquette, I ordinarily would, skate right past this, but here again, I've had a couple instances as of late in the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, and it seems like it's worth mentioning. Again, I don't know all of you, so this may not apply, so please just be respectful and listen anyway. I introduced myself at the start of the first video as Dr. Cuban. Yes, I do have a PhD. Yes, I am a doctor. But that's the only time you'll really hear me mention that. I've never been one for the pomp and circumstance of it all. And so I'm fine in your communication with me on a first name basis. That's fine. I don't mind that. But I do ask that it be respectful. Okay, I mean, when you're emailing me, when you're asking questions about things, this is not a 140 character tweet, with shorthand prose, with no salutation whatsoever, or hey, okay, my name's not Hey, my name is Adam, all right? So, again, why am I saying this? Well, because I've actually had to correct a couple people, and yeah, that may sound elitist of me, but I don't really give a shit. Learn how to communicate professionally, folks. You're trying to strive to become a professional, so start acting like one now. You don't just flick the light switch when you graduate college and then, expect to change your bad habits at a moment's notice. It doesn't work that way. So, again, I would say that this is how it works for me. With your other profs, they're going to have different preferences. So you got to ask them, or you need to follow how they sign off on emails that they send to the class or something like that. Do they use doctor, professor, Mr., Ms., just their first name? How exactly do they communicate with you? And then you need to reciprocate that. And, you could say, oh, well, I have 6 profs. It's so confusing. Yeah, folks, if you can't keep tabs on what 6 different people want you to do in terms of how they address you, you got bigger problems in life. So, get on top of this stuff and make sure, again, respect is huge. All right. I'm pretty laid back. I think I have certain policies, and I already explained why I have those policies. But, I want to have a fun class. I want to have an enjoyable class session with you. But I also want it respectful. And, when the moment comes, if the moment comes that I find that I've been disrespected, oh, you'll know about it. Oh, you'll definitely know about that. So let's not go in that direction. And so along those lines, I don't restrict technology. I don't prohibit it. I mean, that'd be virtually impossible for me to enforce that. Even in such a small classroom, it's easy for you to hide that stuff. But here's the thing. If you start screwing around on it to the point where it distracts me and prevents me from doing my job, then I'm going to call you out on that, because I can't be having that. Now, whoops, little alert for me there, sorry. I do want you in class, and, a couple of other things I'm going to mention. This might push my screencast to a third part here, so just bear with me. I put this in here because, again, I don't like some of the I can't tell if they're anomalies, if it's just one-time instances, if it's certain individuals, or if this is a sign of a trend, among the college student populace there at Ball State. But, folks, take a look at this. Of 100 people represented our population globally, there's 7.3 billion as of the start of this semester. Only 7 out of those 100, if you normalized it for demographics, psychographics, what have you, only 7 of those 100 folks would have a college degree. That's it. So what you're doing, it does matter, and it does have value. I remind you of that because I'm starting to feel like college is becoming one glorified high school. Folks, you're an adult. I'm going to start treating you like an adult. So I want you to feel like what you're doing is in fact worth it. There is a debate whether or not you need a college degree or not, especially in journalism and in media communications and so forth. Some say it's not where you study, but what, well, there's a lot of push on STEM fields. I think journalism is a great field. I still maintain that people always want stories. People like reading and viewing stories. So I think you're in a very intriguing field, but I would also say that it's not what you study, but how and why. And so along those lines, I'm posing a couple questions here in the syllabus of all places to, again, get you to start thinking about why you're here in the first place. So, how are you learning stuff? By waiting to the last minute, or are you pacing yourself? I just showed you in the part 1 of this screencast, you have everything. Your assignments, your quizzes, it's all laid out for you. So what are you going to do about that? Or, are you just going to wait, until the night before, hours before it's due, and then throw something at me that's maybe, half of what you're capable of producing? And then the other thing that I find I have a struggle with, frustration with just in general, is this idea of suffering in isolation. Folks, if you have a question, again, be an adult about it and ask. I don't know, I may come across as intimidating, I really don't know, but guess what? It is my job to help you. I'm very much aware of that. And I will work with you. I will meet with you. Again, you'll have to just ask the people who've had me in class before, but I will do that. But you have to take the initiative. You start getting zeros, you start failing assignments, missing class all the time. I am not going to email you when I have over 140 students 140 of your peers, I can't be, hovering over you, asking you where you are and why you're not coming to class. I figure you have a good reason. But the fact is, you're not here. So you're missing out and you're missing points. And along those lines, why are you here? Obviously you're in this course because it's required for you to move on in your program of study. But what about college in general? What are you doing to make this education of yours worthwhile? Again, you're 7 out of 100, if you do the ratio, if you do the math. So I'm throwing this out there because, again, I don't know that I like some of the patterns that I've started to pick up on. So I'm going to be proactive about it, and I'm going to address it right up front on day one with you. And I'm hoping that this will, circumvent certain problems that may, come down the line. Here's your evaluation. Now, again, folks, I don't do just points only. So as I told you, you get points for every class session. In fact, you get 10. You get 4 points for being punctual, 9:30. You get 4 points just for sitting your butt down in a seat, and then you get another 2 points for constructively participating in the day's agenda. So 10 points, 2 class sessions a week times 5 weeks. All right. So what you're staring down is anywhere from 90 to 100 points. We might have a holiday in there, I think, coming up. So, 100 points, however many points you accrue over the course of those 5 weeks, divided by 90, 100, the points possible, that quotient is 15% of your grade. Obviously, in and out of class exercises are going to be the largest percentage of your course grade because that's where you're going to spend the most amount of time and effort. So there's that. Your final project, we'll talk much more about that later on. That's 20%, so a fifth of your grade, and then another fifth are those 2 quizzes. So each one of those 2 quizzes I showed you in Blackboard, yeah, you have all the time in the world to do them, and you should take your time, but each one will be worth 10% of your grade, and you've got 2. So again, keep that in mind as you strategize. And then I go into detail here about the evaluation measures. I'll let you read that. So how do you read the schedule? We'll go ahead and close out this part 2 with this conversation. So here we are in week 1, and I make a note here because it's odd the way this is set up. Week 1 is going to read Thursday, Tuesday, and that's going to happen all the way through Thanksgiving. And then week 4 and 5 are back to your usual Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday. So pay attention to that. Obviously I'm gone, so I make a note of it for you. All right, and so what's going to happen? Well, Tuesday, when we next see each other, and I'll be back in class real time, we're going to have a visitor from University Libraries drop in. I'm going to have you take a pretest because I need to know collectively what all you know as a group. And then after that, I make slight modification and tweaks to what you see in the rest of the schedule. And that's another reason too, I might as well just throw this out there, that's another reason too why, where is that? Here we go. Why I put percentages. Because I've never understood profs that know before they've even met their students, we're going to do assignment A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and then combined, that's 1,000 points. Oh, how nice and neat and pretty that is. I don't know what all of you know. I got to find out. So that's what we're going to do on Tuesday is a short pretest, and then I'm going to jump into some AP style concepts related to literary source material that I want you to know. So before, this is what we're doing when we get to class at 9:30. Before we get to class, you need to pay attention to this. So online, in Blackboard that is, I have a reading assignment, I have a YouTube video, I mentioned those viewing exercises in there, and then there are a couple things I want you to look at, read, mark in your AP style book before we get to class. And then you'll see if we have an exercise planned in class, some sort of activity that might amount to points. If you have something due that you need to submit at 9:30, usually as a hard copy, it'll be listed over here in this column to the far right. So then, moving ahead then to Thursday, the 12th, I have the syllabus down, although you should have read it by then. I have another tutorial I'd like you to read in Blackboard, and then RM, that's our textbook, Reporting for Media. I want you to have read chapter 1 before then we start talking about research as a process and source materials, and then I'll have an exercise plan for Thursday's class next week. So this is how you interpret the schedule, and you can go through and take a look week by week, and that then rounds out the syllabus for you. So very thorough overview, but again, I want you to read it and I want you to make sure that you understand it. And if you don't, then when I come back to class on Tuesday, let's have that conversation and get that taken care of at the outset of the course instead of later on. So part 3 is coming your way next.